All right, welcome to Therapized podcast. This is your host, Guy Hernandez, licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California. And this is episode 27, a therapized dose, going from guilt to gratitude. All right, well, I've been thinking about doing this episode for a while and actually wanted to do it during the holidays because talking to certain people, guilt seemed to come up a bit. I want to really just start off with why do we even experience guilt, right? What is kind of the purpose of it? And it can have a pro-social aspect to it, which is I'm thinking about how my behavior impacted how you feel and how you experience our relationship. And we do this by, or addressing the guilt sometimes by apologizing that we may have done something hurtful or made a misstep or caused some pain, maybe unintentionally, or acknowledge the behavior that we did and maybe that we didn't want to do it. However, sometimes we have a guilt response when we actually haven't done anything hurtful, just by doing things we can normally do, and that what we did isn't inherently wrong or bad necessarily. And I don't generally like to use those words, but I'm gonna give you an example. Saying sorry for declining an invite and then feeling badly that you declined an invite to do something, feeling guilty for that. Saying sorry for asking for help. This might look like sorry to bother you, right? This also may look like sorry to keep you waiting when the person waited for a minute or 2 minutes. And don't get me wrong, I love being early and I hate keeping people waiting. I hate waiting. But am I always sorry if it was 1 minute that they waited on Zoom for me? No, I'm really not sorry. But why would I have that response? Why would it, sorry to bother you? Sorry I can't make it. Why would I have that response? And that can have its own adaptive response built in. And where can this become problematic? Well, where I've seen it become problematic from my experience is that it creates a pattern of perpetual punishment. How is that for alliteration? Where I'm consistently in the wrong when I do something that someone may have an unfavorable response to, or that they somewhat dislike. But how realistic is it that everyone we interact with is going to always like our response? Of course, someone might be let down if you decline an invite. They wanted you there. But does that mean you did something inherently wrong? That you set a boundary for yourself and said, I'm really tired tonight, I'm just going to stay home, or I'm just not in a good place, I just need to rest. So is it really guilt you're experiencing? Do you really feel badly for not going, or are you more concerned about not looking badly, not being perceived as a bad friend, not being perceived as a nuisance or a bother? So maybe it's not really about guilt, but it's more about our own shame and what we think of ourselves and how we see ourselves and what we worry about others seeing or thinking about us. So maybe I'm not really sorry that I can't go, but now I'm worried you're going to think of me negatively. So I'm going to say sorry to protect myself from you thinking of me negatively. And this is where I started coming up with this going from guilt to gratitude. And not that I think saying things changes things miraculously, but I do think how we talk to ourselves internally and how we communicate externally can influence how we feel in our behavior. So what's true, or what's more authentic? And a lot of times, right, when I work with people in therapy or even doing my own work, we aim to live authentically, right? And we generally feel better when we're living authentically, when we say what we actually mean. And I'm not saying you don't mean the sorry, but I don't know, do you just think about it? All those moments, oh, sorry to keep you waiting, sorry for bothering you, sorry, I can't go. Are you really sorry? Did you really hurt someone? Did you do something mean or painful? Just because the person's like upset about it doesn't mean that you actually did something mean or painful. And it makes sense for them to be upset, right? They want you there. Or did they say it's okay? Who knows? That's their response. So, flipping it of if it's true to you, going, is this a situation that I'm not actually sorry, but I am grateful they invited me. I am grateful that they want my presence. So instead of saying, sorry, I can't make it, I may say, hey, I appreciate the invite. Thank you for thinking of me. I have a gratitude response. Also, anecdotally, what I've noticed is when we get out of this kind of semi-guilt, and when I say semi-guilt, where it's like you didn't really do anything painful, but you're responding from a place of guilt, the receiver, it becomes a burden for them sometimes too. Like, oh, now I have to hear your sorries when you just say you're not going, But then to hear the thank you, it's like, okay, they did appreciate getting invited. Hey, not this time, thank you, I appreciate it. Maybe next time. Instead of saying sorry to bother you, if you don't really mean it, how about thanks for your time, thanks for your help, thanks for your support. Because who knows that they want the sorry? I think if you really think about it, you'll know when someone wants sorry, right? When there's actual real tension and there's been a conflict or something you did that you actually don't feel good about at your core. Like, yeah, I didn't really mean when I said that. That was a mean thing I said or did, or I acted in a way that doesn't really sit well with me. It's like there's probably dissonance if you're saying sorry to things that you actually you're just being yourself. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for your help. Instead of sorry to bother you. Sorry I keep bothering you. Thank you for waiting patiently. Instead of sorry to keep you waiting. This is complicated because there's a bit of layers to it. And this might remind you of a past episode I did on the guilt of saying no. Right? Am I really feeling guilty, or am I just protecting myself from looking badly or being perceived in a negative light by the other person? I don't want them to see me as a bother. I'm going to say sorry to bother you immediately. So your presence and asking for questions is inherently bothersome. Maybe you've been made to feel that way, or have had that experience growing up, maybe a teacher, maybe a parent, and that's kind of your conditioning. Well, hopefully this provides, in this Therapized dose, a moment to reflect upon that, going from guilt to gratitude. Am I really sorry for this? And if I'm stuck in that perpetual pattern of punishment, then I'm often wrong and not doing the right thing. I'm often not good enough because I have to keep apologizing. So seeing if it makes sense to you and is genuine, to switch it to a gratitude response and see how that sits differently. Just something to think about on this Therapized dose. Once again, thank you for your time and listening. Please like, share, subscribe, and rate on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere else you get your podcast. This will be on Instagram and IG stories. Please share with your friends, families, anyone else you think could benefit from hearing this and thinking about how we experience guilt. But that was just a little dose. There's so much to dig into on guilt. Something to think about for this weekend. All right, remember, Therapized podcast is not intended to be your mental health treatment or support, but I do hope it offers you a moment to connect and reflect. Thank you as always, and talk to you next time.